So that would be a terrible way of laundering money. Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought today we would get stuck into the suggestions passed to developers for May of 2022, starting with the ground stuff this time because there's a bunch of really interesting options, so why not have a look at them and see what is at least being sent to the developers. Obviously it's update season, so there's a bunch of stuff which is already coming out, but it's always nice to have a look at things that may come in the future as well in War Thunder. Let's get into it. The first one is a bunch of different variants for the M19. It looks like with the M19 being an AA, it was decided to make a bunch of different anti-tank variants of the vehicle as well on the same chassis. So starting off with the first one, it is a recoilless rifle version with a quad set of 75mm recoilless rifles. Although the installation of the recoilless rifles and mortar on the M37's machine gun mounts was impractical, it was desirable to provide a suitable motor carriage for recoilless weapons. And in June of 1945, the director of the Ordnance Research and Development Center at Aberdeen Proving Grounds proposed the installation of a full battery of 4 105mm recoilless rifles on a suitable vehicle. Since there were no 105mm recoilless rifles available, 4 T21 75mm recoilless rifles were selected and installed on a modified twin 40mm gun motor carriage, the M19. The 40mm guns were removed and replaced by the recoilless weapons on the modified M12 mount. And it seems like they were put in a square formation, so not fully, kind of, I suppose, set up like the Whirlwind, as you would see it. The next vehicle is, of course, the same one, but with the actual 105s. So the test firing at Aberdeen proved to be successful, and it was recommended that the development program continued using T19 105mm recoilless rifles when they became available. The 105mm installation was completed in 1946, and evaluation at Aberdeen. However, now the war was over, no additional M19s were converted. So basically, after the hostilities ceased, a lot of stuff when it came to the Second World War technology was kind of scrapped and they started anew. It was a very interesting period of history when it comes to 1945 and 46 with American tank development. We might go into it at some point. I've talked about it in previous videos, but we could maybe cover it again. It's just really interesting how they went, right, stop everything. Now it's time for new ideas and new thoughts. And then the last vehicle that we have, it is actually the T22 75mm anti-aircraft gun mounted version. So on the 1st of February 1945, OCM 26544 recommended the development of a self-propelled mount for the 75mm gun, the T22. This weapon was intended for use as an anti-aircraft gun at short to medium ranges using the new radio proximity fuse. At that time, the 75mm projectile was the smallest that could be fitted with such a fuse, and the gun was installed on the T18 mount with a recoil-operated loader rammer. Using this arrangement, the gun was designed to fire automatically at a rate of 40 to 45 rounds per minute, which would be quite spicy for a 75. The chassis of the twin 40mm gun motor carriage, the M19, was selected for the installation of the T22 gun and the T18 mount. The mount for the dual 40mm gun was removed, and an adapter ring was used to install the T18 mount. Tests at Aberdeen Proving Grounds ran from February 46 to June 48, and problems with the loader rammer made it extremely difficult to obtain automatic fire, and then only when the gun was in a horizontal position. Who could have seen that coming? Automatic loaders in history have had a lot of issues getting started. This also may have been fortunate since it was determined that the natural frequency of the vehicle suspension was approximately the same as the firing rate of the automatic cannon, so it literally would have shook itself apart due to resonance. Needless to say, this would have resulted in destructive vibration during automatic fire. Further tests with M19 chassis were discontinued, but the experience was useful during the development of the post-war Sky Sweeper anti-aircraft gun. The idea on paper of this thing sounds wonderful, and then you get things like that happen, which are very, very sad. But overall, some very interesting variants of the M19. Britain also gets a vehicle in the form of the Chieftain Mk.11, which, to be quite honest with you, I'm very surprised we haven't actually seen yet. What the Chieftain Mk.11 is a Mark 10 with thermals. That's pretty much the only real difference between them. It's just a Mark 10, which they're equipped with the thermal, observation, and gunnery system in place of the original IR spotlight. Now, the TOGS, which is the thermal, observation, and gunnery system, was made by Barr and Stroud, and it was on the Chieftain Mk.11. It used the IR-26 thermal camera in conjunction with the IR-18 thermal night sight, featuring a wide field of view of 13.6 degrees and a narrow field of view of 4.75 degrees. The Chieftain Mk.11 was the last adopted version of the Chieftain for the British Army. It was almost entirely identical to the previous one, the Mark 10, which we already have, keeping the same weight, armor, firepower, and mobility, with the only major change being the gunnery system in the form of a thermal observation and gunnery system, replacing the original spotlight on the left-hand side of the turret and a further modified NBC protection system. 324 Chieftains were modified to Mark 11 standard from 1991 to 1995, when the Chieftain was finally retired from service and the Challenger 2 was put into service in its stead. So it would be kind of cool to see this at some point. I'm just very surprised we haven't seen this, especially after the Type 74s are added, where one had thermals, the premium one, and the others did not. The next vehicle is for China, and it is, of course, the PGZ-88, or the Type 88 SPAG. This article is written awfully, so hopefully whoever passed it can start learning English. The design of the Type 88 is that the chassis is based off the Type 69 main battle tank, but it's equipped with a new box-shaped turret, which has the anti-aircraft system in it. It has access to two twin Type 76 37mm guns, which have the fire control radar with up to a range of 15 kilometers, and also has a reaction time of 6 to 11 seconds. The cannons are also similar to the Type 63 on the PGZ-63. So the guns have a maximum range of up to 3,500 meters and have a fire rate of 360 rounds per minute. There's a crew of 4 in this thing, a driver, gunner, commander, and also the tracker. And the tank is powered by a 427 kilowatt diesel engine with a weight of 35 tons. The gun depression also is 5 degrees on it, which is quite nice. And overall, the 37mm have some pretty decent ammunition behind them. Think like Veek or Sergeant York, and that's basically what you get from this SPAG. Japan gets a Jeep with an ATGM on it, specifically the Komatsu LAV, which carries the Type 87 ATGM. Not all the time, but sometimes. The Type 87 ATGM, it's the anti-guided missile, obviously, and this started its development around 1976 and went to 1978. It was intended as a replacement for the Type 64 ATGM, which was considered to be too slow and bulky. Well, they got that right. Testing of the missile started in 1982, with it entering service in 1989. The system consists of a missile launcher and a laser designator, both mounted on a tripod. Unlike the wire-guided Type 64, the Type 87 used laser guidance instead. It's typically operated by 3 people, one to launch the missile, another to aim, and a third to reload. Unlike the Type 64, the missile launcher is directly held and fired by the operator, increasing its flexibility. The system is still in use with the Japanese forces, and is usually mounted on the Type 73 Shin light truck, similarly to the larger Type 79 ATGM. However, very few missile reloads can be carried out on the Type 73. That is where the Komatsu LAV comes in. This is a light armoured vehicle, and it was developed in 1997, and having entered service in 2001, this vehicle was designed to provide a high-speed troop transport that could withstand small arms fire, unlike the Toyota High Mobility Vehicle or the Type 73 light truck. As the name implies, it was manufactured by Komatsu. The LAV uses high tensile strength steel instead of RHA, including the raised hatches on the roof for the gunner, which is quite nice. It also has been deployed to various countries, so it's been to Iraq, Haiti, South Sudan, and Somalia. Additional modifications include extra armor on it, wire cutters, protection from sand and dust from the radiators, and also a few more additions. So basically, typically this vehicle is armed with a 5.56 or a 12.7 machine gun or a Type 01 LMAT fire and forget anti-tank missile. The loadout with the Type 87 ATGM was an early test, but doesn't seem to be used regularly. So it can be mounted, but it seems like other weapons are usually favorable for the machine. The French get a weird early Second World War vehicle, the Laffly W15T CC, and this was a self-propelled anti-tank gun which was made to be used in combat, featuring some excellent mobility and also a very good field gun in general. It was designed in December of 1939, and the prototype was built in January of 1940. While the vehicle had its issues, the Army wanted a self-propelled gun to be put in service, so they initially ordered and planned to build 50 of these vehicles with a speed of 5 vehicles built every 2 days because of their need. And the idea was so urgent that 70 Lafflys were built in a hurry and immediately put into service, even if there wasn't really a prototype standard. This didn't really help them, though, obviously, with the Battle of France. The armament was the SA-37 47mm, and also it had a machine gun of 7.5mm, but basically what this is a truck with a 47mm on the back. That's pretty much how it is. So it wouldn't have been hard to really, make. The engine was a Hotchkiss 4-cylinder, 52 horsepower one, so you're not really motoring around the place. Supposedly this thing could get down to 60 kilometers an hour, probably if you dropped it off a cliff. It weighed 6,000 kilos and would have a crew of about 4 to 5. So this would be quite a fun little rank 1 machine, I suppose. But yeah, it's a truck with a gun on it. You know, many countries did this. The Deacon is a great example of this for Britain, but many others tried this, especially in desperate times. The Swedish would get the STRV-121B Christian II. This is an upgrade, or I should say an attempt to upgrade, the STRV-121 to the STRV-122 standard. It wasn't deemed worth it, and it was discontinued after one prototype had been modified, which was known as the Christian II. It was given the GALIX smoke discharges, like the 122. The tail lights were moved up into the rear grille, and the rear bustle was given a lid instead of a tarp of the normal STRV-121, and also a reversing camera was added. Internally, it was given all the electronics of the 122, which is an electrical turret drive and also command systems. So basically, what you would get is a slightly worse 121, because it would have worse smoke grenades on it, but it's pretty much the same vehicle, and it could be easily added to the tech tree, or it could be added as a premium, which, recently we've seen quite a few high-tip premiums, so this could be Swedish's one. The Israelis get the M113 Zelda HVMS. This is a very interesting vehicle. Basically, the M113A1 APC, also known as Zelda, when it was in service with the IDF, was the mainstay APC of Israel's ground forces since the 1970s, and is still being used in some units today. It served its purpose as an APC well enough. The M113 was a platform which was very easy to modify for different purposes. So in an attempt to create a demonstrable vehicle with the new 60mm cannons, which were jointly developed by Otto Melara in Italy, IMI created a light tank concept based on the M113, simply known in retrospect as the M113 HVMS. Now, this thing was a prototype, but it was proposed for purchase to the IDF, so could easily be in. In the year of 1977, Israel's IMI and Italy's Otto Melara began a collaborative project for ammunition development based on an Otto Melara cannon design. Soon after work had begun, both companies looked into the possibility of jointly developing a cannon, which would be further assisted by Otto Melara with the development of an auto-loading system and a suitable turret. At some point during the development of the cannon, the collaboration ceased, and each of the companies went on to develop their own version of the soon-to-be 60mm hypervelocity gun. The gun itself, in the version created by IMI, called the HVMS gun, or the Hyper Velocity Medium Support Gun, was designed for infantry support and could be used to attack armored vehicles, fortifications, and even helicopters. Despite this, it soon became apparent to IMI that the full potential of the gun as an infantry support weapon could only be realized if it were mounted on a light vehicle, which would be used by infantry. Seeing as the M113A1 was the primary APC used by the IDF at the time, it was a natural choice for IMI to experiment with its hull first. So pretty much what they did is they put a really wonky turret on top of the M113, which was quite interesting. It was also rejected as kind of a thing for other countries as well, so it didn't even see any export success. But overall, it's at least an interesting vehicle, and it would be nice to see it in the tree for Israel. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman675, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Jerry Prevolt, Megadino King, Orange Tail, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Uncle Bean, Sem Arslan, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.